Hello and welcome to the Andy Hardy Show. I am your host, Andy Hardy, and this is going to be the part 2 of episode 2. So last week we left off and I was kind of making fun of some of the reasons why people in the church do certain things they do as opposed to finishing out that specific episode. So this episode is going to be my disillusionment, the moment, the time when I left excuse me, the Independent Fundamental Baptist Church. And I'm going to need some water for this episode, so if you'll excuse me. All right, okay. So last week I finished out the episode talking about why people tithe, and more or less, it was just going on about the influence the hierarchy of the church actually has over its members, which in turn explains why after I had tried to commit suicide and the great disillusionment that had come along with that by the authorities in the institution that I was immediately involved in, being incredibly unhelpful, incredibly rude. I was accused of trying to ruin their ministry. I was accused of basically hurting their business. And these were people who were supposed to be my friends, who were supposed to love me, and they were just mad because I fucked some shit up for them. So from that point on, yes, I became very disillusioned for a brief time. Of course, my dad was still a pastor, and it was very difficult to... It was difficult to take a third-party perspective. I knew I was miserable. I didn't know what to do about it. I moved back home with my family. I got a really crappy job at Dollar General. From there, the one good thing that happened through all of that is the concern that it brought my family of me trying to commit suicide. I saw a doctor. A doctor said, you have spinal stenosis. We need to do an operation. The whole family moved from Illinois to Missouri so that I could have the operation here in Missouri. Very expensive operation. I had a spinal decompression, which was very, very good for me. And from there, on a business note, I started my own business, and I was doing very well thanks to my dad and a dear friend who was working with me at the time. They were very supportive and very helpful, and that would have been very fruitful for me, both personally and professionally, if I would have stuck with it. But a lot of pressures from both outside the church and within the church told me that I was nothing if I didn't have a job. Now, I was limited by jobs because the church demands that you be available to them. I think I mentioned in the last episode, you've got to they have to be able to suck on your tit 24/7. They want it there. They want it ready. They want your nipple hard as a rock. And you should be happy. So that limited my choice of employment. I wound up working with Walmart, and I did well with Walmart for a little while, but it was not my thing. It was not my groove. I am a self-employed, I'm a independent contractor type of personality. I prefer to take care of me. I don't like it when someone else tries to take care of me, and I really don't like trying to work on someone else's schedule because I'm me. Anywho, so from that point, I was very, very stressed out, very tired. I moved to Indiana, had another job opportunity, and it was better. But then again, when it didn't align with the things that the parameters the cult had set out for me to have as far as being available on certain days at certain times, I left job A that was working with my cousin. I went to job B, which was actually a career. It was a good career move. I went to work with the Men's Wearhouse. Everything was going smoothly until the Men's Wearhouse consumed so much of my time. The cult said, choose them or us. At which point, obviously, I had to choose the cult because they weren't paying me or helping me or doing anything for me. So I chose the cult over my own career, over my own income, which is just to show you, even at this point, I'm disillusioned with the cult. I'm a little upset with the cult, and I'm not understanding things of the cult, but it was so ingrained in me that it was that important that I please the leaders of this subcategory that I was with. And so, yes, I left my job with the Men's Wearhouse. I took on 2 part-time employment jobs that were just terrible, and the cult was proud of me for this because I had chosen, they lifted me up, and because I had chosen the church over the world, etc., etc. And in reality, I was just taking some really shitty advice. At this point, I became very disillusioned. I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I didn't know what was going on, and this is the point. In the next 6 months is where the shit hit the fan, and there are some very interesting things. So strap in, strap on, and get your coffee ready and some chips or something or whatever you do. I don't think pairing coffee with chips is a great idea, but if that's your thing, enjoy. So at this point in time, my mom has decided to come out after being closeted for... I say it like she's a lesbian, no offense, she's not. She was molested by one of the leaders, who was not just a leader, but was a dear family friend. And we had, so let me go into this for a second. We didn't really technically on the surface practice shunning. No one would have called it shunning. But if your family wasn't a part of the cult, wasn't a part of the independent fundamental Baptist movement, if they weren't helping you, you just didn't talk to them, you didn't communicate with them, there was no real rules. But the less you dealt with anyone who was on the outside of the environment, the better you were for it, is basically how it was looked at. So a lot of times what that meant is within the cult, you develop new relationships that took over your organic family, your actual family relationships, which I know people do that all the time, especially if they have a poor childhood or they've got bad grandparents. It happens. But in our case, we looked up to the person who hurt my mother when she was a teenager as our grandparent. And we can go into why victims are intimidated and don't speak out for years and years and things like that in another video. And it's hard for someone who's not victimized to really to understand, oh my God, why don't you just go to the police? And there is a whole series in that question to answer that question. But she had come out, she had written a letter to the authorities of the church that now I was working for. And the way we were raised is if someone accuses a leader in your church of something, the way to find out whether or not it's true is to go to that person, look them in the eye, and ask them if it's true. And if they look you in the eye and say, no, it's not true, then it's not true. And that's it. And it's simple. And that sounds ridiculous. It sounds stupid. It sounds insane to those who are not brainwashed. But when that's ingrained into you, there's this idea that if it is true, they'll hesitate or they'll have a hard time or they will be so convicted by the Holy Spirit inside them that they'll have to tell you the truth, which is no. So anyway, the man who I approached over this issue with my mother, who was she accused of, in my mind, this was a false accusation, or maybe it wasn't, but it didn't carry that much weight to me because of who she was accusing and the way I was raised to respect these people. So I went to this man who was like a grandfather to me, and I said, is this true? And he looked me in the eye and he said, no. And I can tell you that, I kind of took it with a grain of salt. The part of me that was trained by these people immediately believed him. And then the part of me that was the part of me that tried to commit suicide, the part of me that had been hurt was like, this isn't right. But I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know how to handle it. These people were being very kind to me. They had helped me with my business, which is what they do. And they make it look like they're just helping you. They're being a benefactor. But a lot of times they're trying to buy you. They purchase you into a corner as much as they can. And they'll go into a lot of debt to put you in a corner just so that you don't do this kind of shit. They really don't like it. But which is, they should all be dead. Or worse. So I looked him in the eye, and that part of me that had been raised by that religious sect, yes, it believed him. And so I turned for a brief period of time, at least it appeared. I don't think my heart ever really turned against my mom, but it very much appeared that I was against my mom. And I had to condemn my mom verbally to fit in with said individuals. Again, like I said, I had built my business. I was tailoring and I was doing image consulting, and I was doing image consulting for the people who were doing damage control after the leader of this organization, of the current leader of the Fundamental Baptist Church at that time. His name is Jack Scopp, and if you Google that, you'll find out that he's sitting in prison because he did he had sex with a minor. So yeah, well, he's where he should be, although he should probably be in more than one piece. After that, I was helping that specific church with their own recovery, if you will. And so it was really, I was in a very weird place. And had I was raised that this was our Vatican, and I was helping our Pope. And so, no one turns that opportunity down. It was one of the biggest opportunities I've ever had. And, but I was in a very bad place. And when the actual shit hit the fan is when I was on the way to this man's house with a carload of suits. And I was hit by a driver who was driving drunk, who was, he was driving drunk. He was driving without insurance. He came across a double yellow line and hit me. He was out on parole. That's the other thing. And he didn't have a license. So a lot of things counting against him. The district attorney sent me a letter relatively quickly, which I never got, thanks to other people. And we'll get into that another time. But the cult basically abandoned me. They left my side. They have lawyers. They have a lot of money and a lot of influence. But they just left me. They left me to rot, which should be expected. But at that point, I spent several weeks in bed because I was in a lot of pain. The insurance company that I was with, which I was counseled, again, these people were still counseling me, and there was still a big part of me that was following their shit. I was counseled not to contact my insurance company. I was counseled not to bother them. They'll take care of things. I pretty much did just that. I didn't bother them. They paid off the car that I was in, was completely totaled. And then after that, they did nothing. So they didn't respond to my emergency room bill. They didn't respond to any medical bills. I had TMJ afterwards. And I had a lot of, I need to have an MRI because of my spine and a lot of other things. So my insurance company they did what insurance companies do best, which is fuck off. That's pretty much it. They're just like, oh great, more money for us. And so after that, it was my parents, it was my mother that I had been condemning for the last 6 months of my life who reached out and helped me. And she put me in touch with my childhood doctors, who then got me in touch with some physicians who were actually capable of doing some things, either pro bono or would prorate certain things so that I could get the help that I needed. And then eventually our family attorney went back and took care of the situation with the car insurance company and got most of that paid for. So during that time, I had become very disillusioned with all the terrible things that had happened with me. And I spent the next probably 24 months in a very, very strange gray area as far as independent fundamentalism was concerned, of the Baptist variety. And I wasn't sure what was going on. I was really upset with my mom for no in particular reason, but other than she had walked out of it, and now she was doing things that to me were horrific, like wearing pants and listening to music that wasn't ordained by the ministry for us to listen to. And I was just, I was mortified by these things. And I had the part of me that was this reverential dickhead that had been built by this organization, hated her for it. And the part of me that wasn't sure. So I spent the next 24 months in a church with a very good-hearted man, but I was in a church for wrong reasons. I was in a church that didn't matter. And I was stressing myself over things that were not important. I was wasting time, energy, and money on the independent fundamentalist beliefs, which were doing nothing. They were just doing nothing for me. And at a point there, I was taking medication. I was taking pain medicine just so I could show up to church. And I remember an interesting place, and probably the place where I can physically say that's when I started to leave. I got up in a Sunday morning service, and I was a music leader of this church, and I was high as a kite. Hang on. I was high as a kite, and I had just taken, I think, 3 or 4 oxycodone, which is technically probably an overdose. And I remember I was singing, and I had been singing these songs since I was born, so I knew everything. I'm leading the music. And I just separate, you have those moments. I think people have a lot of words for them. Scientology has some interesting words for them. Out-of-body experience. It's just where you separate from yourself and you're looking at you from everyone else's perspective, or from, maybe you'd call it the universe's perspective, and I'm looking at myself up here leading and singing, I'm like, holy shit, I am high as fuck right now. And no one in this auditorium knows or cares, because I look perfect, because my tie is perfect, because my suit looks better than theirs, because I got up earlier than they did, and I ran a bus route this morning, because I taught a kid's Sunday school class this morning, and because of all of those things, it doesn't matter if I abuse drugs, and it doesn't matter how bad I am, and it doesn't matter what I do, because as long as I look good and I'm doing more than they're doing in the church, I can get up here and do whatever the fuck I want. I remember thinking that. And I wasn't thinking it like, okay, yeah, let's start this regime of terror. I was mortified. And that's when I really, really, really realized the state of the leaders in that organization. I had power. Now, I didn't have like power, but I mean, imagine that. Imagine being able to get up on a platform and have all these people, for lack of a better term, worship you because of what they thought you were, when in reality, you were not even remotely close to that. I was just a high guy doing what he had been doing his whole life. And I mean, the way they preach and teach against getting high and against drugs and all of this, but as long as I was taking something that was prescribed to me by the doctors because I actually had real pain, it didn't matter how high I was when I got up and led singing. And so I can't even begin to explain to you. That's when things began to really fall apart for me. After that, I had a couple more somewhat suicidal moments. Just as I was really realizing that that the last 22, 23 years of my life had just, everything I learned was more or less wrong, tainted in one way or another, and not only that, but it was spent in vain. And not just that it was spent in vain, but that it was spent in vain to aid some of the most cruel, inhuman, and disgusting people on this planet. Well, I mean, imagine waking up one day and finding that you're one of Hitler's aides. That you're working hand in hand with this person, and that is the feeling that I felt when I realized, not that I helped any of them that greatly. I really hope I didn't. I hope I did more harm than good. But that disgust and self-loathing of, oh my fucking God, what have I done? And I don't know how long I spent, but I spent a long time doing nothing. I moved back in with my parents. I laid in my bed a lot. Because how do you recover from that? I should be dead. Like, the horrible things people have done, and the fact that more or less I helped them do them. And, it's disgusting. And so with time, I did recover. I don't know how long of a period of time it was, but I got up on my feet. People were like, you have to work, you know what I mean? And so instead of trying and going and get a job, and I'm sure part of it was I was just, I had some PTSD over going and getting jobs. But I just started sewing out of my home. And I figured I understood business. I understood the principles of it. And so I started from scratch right there. And I built a business in my community. And just about everybody in the community knows me. And anyone who handles clothes around here knows who I am. And not just that they know me, but a lot of them use me. And I've got some really, really great repeat clients who are excellent. And I love what I'm doing. And I took that money, instead of going and getting a crummy part-time job, I went to work on my own terms, and I took my money from my tailoring, and I got my real estate license, and now I am set up as a realtor. I'm still tailoring full-time, and I have 2 other part-time jobs, again, that I do my own. But that's where I'm at, and I don't know if I've made a full recovery, but I'm definitely well on my way. And there's still a great amount of PTSD from that terrible environment. But anyway, I think we're going to wrap that up, and that is so depressing. I don't want these episodes to be depressing. I know they're crazy. I want them to be happy. That's why I try and joke about this crap as much as I can. But it was just a stinking mess. I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you next week right here on The Andy Hardy Show.